Well, welcome aboard, folks. Dr. Charles Parker here one more time at Core Brain Journal, and we have a very, very interesting guest today who's talking about the aging mind and what you can do about it. Francie Healey, thanks so much for joining us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Dr. Parker, for having me. I'm excited to be here.
So, Francie, by way of introduction, is a health and wellness counselor. She combines her expertise in nutrition and hooks it up with mental health. What a great place to be. She's a licensed mental health counselor and certified health counselor in private practice. She has a master's degree in counseling and a certification in health counseling. Very apropos. Her public speaking topics include, get this, brain health and diet, eating well on a budget, self-care and self-worth, get a little self-esteem and taking care of yourself, infant and child nutrition. I want to cover some of that tonight because it's going to be very interesting. And the connection between food, get this, and mood. So Francie works privately with clients both locally and nationally, virtually. Her first book, get this, folks, Eat to Beat Alzheimer's. That's a topic, and it's going to be some of what we're going to talk about tonight. And by the way, Francie has offered her book as a drawing at corebrainjournal.com/071. This is episode 071. Episode 071 drawing, and if you go there, we'll have it up for 2 weeks after this publication of this episode. So it's a manual for health and cooking, and it provides nutritional science and education to help readers become well-informed on the connection between the food they eat and how it affects their brain health now and for the rest of their lives. Thanks so much again for joining us, Francie. Tell us a little bit about yourself personally. Where are you, and what's your personal life like?
Well, I live in Santa Fe, New Mexico, and I am the mother of 2 girls, Gracie and Madeline, and I have a private practice, which is my passion, where I focus on the psychology of eating and a healthy brain and a healthy body. And in my personal life, I really enjoy being in nature and really getting grounded in my senses so that I can be present in my life and to my passions and my inspiration. And one of the things that led me to write my book, Eat to Beat Alzheimer's, was my desire to put voice to nutrition and to lifestyle and how that impacts how we feel mentally and how we feel in terms of our outlook, how we feel in terms of vitality, clarity, and an excitement for life. And I recognized early on in my life the fact that what I ate affected my outlook. What I ate affected whether or not I felt anxious or whether or not I could focus. And I felt when I got training as a therapist that what was missing in my curriculum was the lifestyle, including food, and how that affects mental health. And so it led me on this long journey to come to this point. And I'm just really excited to share it with the listeners.
Well, that's very interesting, Francie. Now tell us a little more, to dive a little more deeply into that interesting conversation. What was it that happened to you that helped you come to realize the relevance, if I can spit it out, the relevance of food in your own mental health? What happened to you?
Well, for many, I started out as an athlete, and that's where my interest in nutrition began. I was a long distance runner, and I recognized that the food that I ate affected my performance. And then I started reading a lot about nutrition, and at that time, there was a I'm not sure if you remember, but back in the 80s and the 90s, there was this fat-free craze. And in addition to that, I bought into it. I bought into fat-free is good for you.
That was the Jim Fixx book, and I can't remember the name. It was Jim Fixx you're talking about, right?
Yeah.
And what was the name of the book? Something about running?
I can't
I can't
actually
remember.
right now.
I remember the
can't
cover.
remember.
I remember the cover with the legs on it, and I know it was red. But anyway,
Okay.
but go ahead. I'm
Yeah, when
sorry I
you,
interrupted you, but I think
no, I'm glad you did.
that was a very
That
interesting
was,
book.
yeah, thank you for naming it, and I need some extra brain health foods to remember the title of that book.
Yeah.
But and some extra fat for my brain. But anyway, we can see how certain books influence a culture. They
Yes.
can influence a reader in a profound way, in which we think that the expert is outside of us, and
Mm-hmm.
we fail to gauge internally whether that lines up with our own constitution, with our own body, with our own wisdom that we carry. And so what I learned was to get hijacked by the experts outside of myself, and that brought me to becoming a vegetarian after reading a book called Diet for New America. I'm not sure if if you've ever read that book, but it was a book about how animals are treated and the processing of animals. And it struck me in a moral way that was, at that time, that it was wrong for me to be eating animals. And so I became a vegetarian in addition to eating fat-free, and dropped a lot of weight, and I was already thin by nature. And I never had energy. I felt depressed all the time, and I lacked passion, inspiration, energy to do what I love, and just felt like I had to get through my life with caffeine. And here I felt like I was doing something good for my body, like the intention was good, but the way I was going about it hijacked me from my own well-being.
Mm-hmm.
And so then it became this journey of learning how to deeply listen, how to tune in to myself and recognize that for my body and for my constitution, I actually needed to get more protein from animal sources, that that I could eat in a way that could invigorate my life force and that could give me more energy. And so when I recognized that, I started to add in wild Alaskan salmon, uh, organic chicken, and I started to feel better. And so I had to transcend the idea of what I thought healthy looked like. And it was through that journey where I could see how that affected my mental health in terms of my outlook, and just feeling more excited about life. And so when I went to school to become trained as a therapist, and was working with women with serious mental illness, I discovered that, as I said earlier, that was missing in their treatment plans. That what they were eating, many of these women were in group homes, and what they were eating in the group homes was like white flour, like white bread, and a lot of processed foods with not many vegetables. And I kept thinking, why are we missing this when we're working with people with serious mental illness? Why are we not looking at exercise? Why are we not looking at resourcing people with their, like something that nourishes them, nature or art, and adding in the nutrition piece? So that led me on a journey of researching various brain disorders, brain disorders or brain issues, and looking if there was a nutritional component.
Mm-hmm. Well, I'm imagining you there with those elderly folks, it sounds like, or at least individuals with chronic mental illness who are seriously incapacitated. And you're getting close to my favorite question, Francie, and that is, hold your breath. How many times a day do you go number 2? Now, I'm not asking you, of course, but that's so relevant in the chronic illness. And
Yes, it is.
we see it all the time. We see so many problems like that. But tell us more. So you did get into it. Then what did you do as you began to, what was the impetus to drive you really right down to ask the questions more completely?
Well, I decided I was doing another job because I didn't want to be a standard therapist.
Mm-hmm.
I felt that limited me, so I went for further training in health counseling, and felt through that experience that I was just going to I've just been trying. I've been trying to develop a practice where I could work with people with my theories and my research from a holistic perspective. And so people would come to me, for example, I had a very small private practice when I started, would come to me for healthy weight. That was my first client who just ended up being healthy. I wanted to learn about healthy weight. And what I recognized as I built my practice is that with, like, for example, with healthy weight, there was often, there may have been other conditions, like there may have been prediabetes, there was inflammation. And I started to become curious about inflammation and then inflammation in the brain. And I started exploring more research on inflammation in the brain and also working with people to develop their own navigation system in terms of what foods were in alignment with their constitution. And I started to recognize that when people became more conscious about their food choices and started to recognize how that felt in their body, that they became more curious, and that they started to notice what foods depleted them and what foods nourished them. So it became this collaborative process where I'm not the expert, I'm the guide in collaboration. And I could educate, but then the clients got to explore this on their own. And when I started to see improvements in my clientele, that included nutrition, that included good fats in their diet, what I later learned is that our brain needs good fat. And I later learned that many of us are missing good fats in our diet, like omega-3 fatty acids. And when I started to work with people nutritionally, even with certain supplements, and I saw that change and that transformation, I knew I was onto something. What I didn't know is what I was going to write about. I knew there was something I wanted to say. There was something I needed to speak, but I needed a number of years to gather the momentum to trust myself enough that what I had established in my practice could be translated into a book.
So true. Isn't that true? It really, you think you're right for a long time, but you have to go and actually have it proven right there in front of yourself on a regular basis before you can feel comfortable stating what it is. Now, I'll tell you, I quickly looked on my phone and I found out what the name of the book was. It was The Complete Book of Running. It was 1977 when that book came out. 1977. And
thank you for looking it up.
It was fun, and and it was a book that I was very interested in myself, and I think it was a transformational book for me at the time, and I went down the same path you went to, in terms of how do I eat correctly and so on. And I think Jim Fixx's death threw me back very significantly, because he was, if you just run, you can do whatever you want to with the food. It doesn't matter what you eat. You just go ahead and run, and you'll be in great shape. And then, of course, he died because that isn't what was working. But then back to you. Let's take a moment, because I know our audience is thinking, gee, that's very interesting. She started to tell us something very important about fats there, and then she hinted about omega-3s. Let's tease that part a little bit, because that sounds like a transformational moment for you when you went from vegetarian, pure vegetarian, to what is healthy that might complement your vegetarian diet.
I'm glad you brought that back up. What I learned is that even as a young person, I craved fat, and I know, like, in my household where I grew up, we had a lot of trans fats because those were considered healthier at the time. So those were the fake-looking butter that was like yellowish, that was in a plastic container. And I remember that never quite satisfied me. So as I did more research and stopped being a vegetarian, I recognized how good I felt when I had very good quality butter, when I had olive oil, when I included fat, and then that led me to the journey of researching the importance of fat for the brain. Because as the years went on, I later, through my research, recognized that many Americans are deficient in what we call omega-3 fatty acids, and that it's important for our brain health to get enough of these specific types of fat in our diet. And what was happening back in the 80s and 90s, and we're recovering from that now, I believe, and I like to hold out hope, is that when we're eating those processed fats, or the fat-free, like for example the margarine and Crisco, we became, what happened is we got a lot of what we call omega-6 fatty acids in our diet. So that comes from like vegetable oils, like soybean oil, canola oil.
That's a very important one. Let me pause right there because we want to get our audience on that. You're saying something that's profoundly important now, and I want to make sure we don't skip over it. So let's break down omega-3s from omega-6s and vegetable oil, Crisco. Let's break that down a little more and say it a little more carefully because people are listening up. What is this going to say? How am I going to save my brain? And let's talk about that a little bit.
Okay, so if you buy any processed or packaged food, I invite the listeners to turn over the package and to listen to look at the label where it might say soybean oil, corn oil, canola oil, safflower or sunflower, or peanut oil. It's in most processed and packaged food. Those oils are high in omega-6.
Omega-6, that's a key point.
Omega-6s. And we also find that in factory farmed animals, as they're typically fed grains rather than grass. So researchers have found that an excess of omega-6 fats from cereals, processed foods, and especially vegetable oils and skin will increase the risk of inflammatory, neurological, and degenerative diseases. So these studies indicate strongly that limiting our intake of omega-6 is essential to the health of our brain. So how do we do that? We start with good fats. We start with omega-3 fats. And what happens is that there's an imbalance in the amount of omega-3 fats to omega-6 fats. And we want to bring them into alignment more. You can have some of it, but not too much. And we'd like to see more of a balance between omega-6 and omega-3 to a 1-to-1 ratio. The tricky part is that it's hard to get omega-3s in our diet. It's possible, though, and I will tell you how. But oftentimes it requires supplementation. So omega-3 fats are in wild Alaskan salmon. You'll also find omega-3 fats in anchovies and sardines, and and we can add in, herring and halibut. I'm about eating clean fish, so I'm more of a fan of wild Alaskan salmon than a farm-raised salmon.
Yeah, let's talk about that. Tell people what the difference is there, if you will, please, because I think that's a very important differentiation as well.
Well, wild Alaskan salmon, so think of salmon as a bigger, even like a bigger fish, and where it comes from, northern waters even. And we want the fish to be clean and pure of toxins. And so sometimes we think we're doing a really good thing for ourselves, but we end up eating fish, for example, even tuna, many of the listeners have heard about, that's high in mercury. So the reason I like wild Alaskan salmon is because it's low in the toxins, or shall I say the brain insults. And I get concerned personally with some of the farm-raised salmon, unless I know the source of it, because of what they feed the fish and the conditions for the fish.
Key point.
So,
do you know what they feed the fish? I mean, I've read about it in the past. I don't have it right in my mind. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but But do you have a recollection of what it is they feed them?
I want to say, I can't remember off the top of my head, but I want to say something that my recollection is that it's food that is inflammatory to humans.
Yeah, and I think it's got heavy metals in it as well. They don't really.
Yeah, I believe that it does, and so that's what I'm saying. Like, we don't know the conditions, and in some cases we do. There are some places you can go and they can, certify that the farm-raised fish, are fed clean foods, or that the conditions are non-toxic. Mm-hmm. But I like to go for things that I know are clean, to keep it simple so I don't get too confused. I'm all about simplicity in our eating. So many of my clients are like, just tell me what fish is clean for the most part. And so I'm really glad you brought up that question, because it is very confusing. And I really want to be an advocate for education so that the listeners can make informed choices and really digest that through their own meaning and through their own wisdom.
Well, pardon me for interrupting, another question comes up while we're talking about that, because there are a couple things that come up to mind when you say that it gets to their own wisdom. One of the old Zen quotes that I've said before in some of these other episodes is a quote that when the student is ready, the master appears. And when you and I were talking offline before we started, this quote came to mind, because I think your position is when the student is ready, the lesson appears. That you can actually pay attention to what's actually going on in an effective way and take that moment as an instructional opportunity, as opposed to waiting for somebody to tell you what to do. And
yeah. Thank you for naming that for me, and I really appreciate it, because it really does get to the core of my own belief system. And oftentimes people come to me, for example, in a health crisis, and the way we frame that is powerful. The health crisis can be a gateway. And, for example, Alzheimer's, a brain disease, is a modern health crisis. But what we're looking for in our collective consciousness, and we're frantically searching for, is a cure, rather than the framing that I'm going to offer, which is an inquiry of what I'm being asked to do differently, an opportunity to experience some vulnerability, to get to know ourselves more intimately, and to become the masters of ourselves in relationship to a condition or an illness or a fear, instead of mastering the illness. And that is that's the invitation, is to continue to build our consciousness and our capacity for self-reflection. And that means it becomes a curious dialogue with ourselves about what is deeply nourishing for me, what is depleting, and it becomes more of a mindset of transformation rather than maintenance.
yeah, it's a very excellent point. That's an excellent point.
Thank you.
Well, transformation requires an awareness of the complexity. And what you were saying is it takes it away from a content focus, from a this or that, to how and why, which takes it to a larger question than just, okay, Alzheimer. Because people, honestly, what I find, and I know you do just from what you're talking, Francie, is the labels don't do justice to the problem, because the label is actually, it looks like it's concrete, but it's actually a fog. It's a smokescreen. Because then a person chases a label, but they have no idea what they're doing. They become frustrated, because Alzheimer was a guy in Germany, as far as I know. I mean, what the heck does that mean? And memory is an issue, but that also can be vague, because it can occur with variables in different contexts. And so, well, maybe I do have a memory problem, maybe I don't. Alzheimer's was a guy in Germany, and it doesn't really get down to what's actually going on with a person.
Yes, and that is the core, right? And that's why it becomes this dialogue with ourselves, this great inquiry. And it's asking a change in the way we live our lives. And it requires courage to walk in a new direction. And it takes time to explore our biological nature, our psychological layers, even our diet. And we're talking here today about a comprehensive approach to ourselves as multi-layered beings. And what I appreciate about what you named is that along this journey, we can get discouraged, particularly when it comes to our health. But that is part of the process, and it's not to be mistaken as a stop sign. And it's an invitation to change direction. And so I feel like that is really at the core of what we're talking about today, is to come into alignment with the wholeness of who we are. And so thank you for naming that for me.
Well, thank you. I think what you're talking about, and I also, while you're responding to that remark that I made a moment ago, it's reminding me of what you said before we even started recording regarding your sense of creating a navigation system. As you know from Core Brain Journal, we're very interested in navigation. We've got boats and maps and looking for direction all over the website, and that whole navigation system is really what you're talking about right now.
Yes, and it's becoming our own inner health advocates by turning on our own navigation system and coming into alignment with ourselves, our body, our mind, our spirit, and and that it's possible. It's possible to transform, and there is hope. And I feel like with Alzheimer's, when we think about it, many of us think about losing our mom. It brings up fear. And rather than the possibility for something that is being shown to us, something that is waking up in us, that we are not the illness, we are more than that. But even more importantly, that we can impact change, not only on the physical level through diet and lifestyle and our own personal practice, our soulful practice, but we can affect change in how we frame it. And so I feel like that's a really interesting area, and that's really gets at the psychology of how we relate to ourselves,
Yeah.
and it really gets to our worth. And what I find over and over again in my practice is that illness or food or fear can be a gateway into our inner world. And what we choose to do with that, whether we turn on our navigation system or not, it's a choice. But if we turn on our navigation system, it is exciting what gets revealed about the wholeness of who we are. And so it's a collaborative process. It's exciting.
Francie, well said. I mean, you're talking about a big picture, a transformational picture. And I know some of the folks here have tuned in because we really talked about the Alzheimer diet. And let's, as we're winding down, that time is torn by, just going by very quickly. Let's take a moment to get down to, as they say in the street, the nitty-gritty. And talk a little bit to the point of some elemental, here's what you need to do if you really want to start on an awareness regarding an Alzheimer's diet. I mean, I think it would be good to hear even, for example, what's the difference between omega-3 and krill oil, or more specifics in terms of what a person needs to do.
Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm just quickly, summarize some bullet points for the listeners that are outlined in my book. And it's based on the latest research. So I wanted to take complicated research on brain health and distill it down in a way that readers could understand and apply in their own lives through recipes. So it's really a manual and a cookbook. And like I was talking about fats as omega-3s, so we want to get more omega-3 fats in our diet. And what that does is it reduces the inflammation in our brain. And so adding healthy fats to your diet, like omega-3 fats like olive oil and coconut oil, which I'm very excited about, all of these fats have numerous beneficial effects on the aging brain. So this is moving from a model of fear of fat or fat phobia, to a model of visualizing that the fat is actually nourishing our brain and providing and reducing inflammation. So my recommendation is cook with coconut oil, cook with olive oil, eat avocados, eat butter that's from butter that's from pasture raised cows, because that's high in omega-3s. And so add that in, but increase your green leafy vegetables. Green leafy vegetables are high in B vitamins. B vitamins are essential for your brain, and many people aren't getting enough of those in their diet. So my cookbook goes into how to make dark green leafy vegetables taste good and support the brain. Additionally, cut out processed and refined foods and sugar. Reduce it. Be curious about your desire for sugar. Be curious about your cravings. Transcend the judgment. Stay curious and notice how it feels. I believe in a model where that's not based in deprivation, but a model where you can replace, like if you're craving sugar, get to the journaling. What's it showing you? Are you needing more sweetness in other areas of your lives? Or are you not getting enough protein in your diet? This is where your navigation system can be turned on. So again, sugar is a big one. I have a lot of people who I work with that struggle with sugar. Add sweet potatoes and add turmeric. These are healing spices that research has shown is incredibly beneficial for the brain. In India, where they use turmeric, the daily part of their diet, they have the lowest rate of Alzheimer's in the world. Right now, in the United States alone, we have 5.4 million Americans suffering with Alzheimer's, and it's expected to rise to 14 million by the year 2050. Mm-hmm. And I think that's astounding. And 47.5 million people in the world have dementia. So with this trajectory, I'm offering an opportunity for hope. I'm offering an opportunity based upon the research that prevention is possible, but it's time to have get curious about our own wisdom and cut out the refined and processed foods and add in whole foods that are easy to cook and delicious.
Well, now let me ask you, what do you know anything about that? You were talking about the omega-3s. Do you think supplementation would be helpful using turmeric and I'm hesitating because I can't remember the derivative of the turmeric, but taking supplements that would help help a person stay on top of those kinds of nutritionals?
Yes, very good question. Let's go to the turmeric. Turmeric contains curcumin, which is the powerful antioxidant in turmeric. And the research has shown that it has a promising effect on the prevention of neurodegenerative diseases. And so I recommend cooking with it daily. But to activate it, I recommend adding black pepper if you are not allergic to it. I also feel for people who have inflammation, I personally supplement with turmeric supplements. And I feel I notice the difference in my body. But I cook with it daily, and so my cookbook really is educating people about how to make breakfast with turmeric, how to have nourishing dinners with turmeric, and making that as part of your lifestyle. And where the medicine is the food, but supplementation is a good idea. In terms of omega-3s, I feel like it's really hard to get enough from our foods, and so I do recommend supplementation. Right now, Americans. It's about 20 to 1, where they're getting 20 times more omega-6s, like I talked about, to omega-3. So we want to bring that, as I said, more to balance. And one way to do that, in addition to eating it through the fish, and there's also plant-based sources, but it needs to be converted in our bodies, walnuts, chia seeds, and so forth, is to supplement. I take omega-3 fish oils, make sure that they are free of neurotoxins and chemicals. You want them to be third-party tested.
So you call them pharmaceutical grade omega-3 fatty acids, as opposed to something you get cheap in Costco, because they're just ground up menhaden from, like, for example, out here the Chesapeake Bay, and they're loaded with all kinds of. So you want omega-3 fatty acids that are pharmaceutical grade, and it'll tell you right on the label that it's pharmaceutical grade.
Yes, it will tell you. So I think that's pretty important. And for the vegetarians and vegans out there, they can, again, you can eat walnuts, chia seeds, flax seeds, hemp, and black currants. However, for some people, I just want to make this point, it can be hard for their bodies, particularly as they age, to convert it into sources that our brain needs in our body.
Now, to convert which? Say that again, because I didn't quite get that. Convert which?
It's the vegetarian sources are called alpha-linoleic acid, ALAs, that are acquired from vegetarian sources. They need to be converted into our body. So our body has to do our brain has to do an extra step to convert it into the pure form of omega-3s. So that's a very simple way of saying it. So I'm saying, take it, but just remember that for some brains, and this is where you get curious and you explore it, some brains, they need a little more. So just be aware of that. But I think it's a good insurance policy. And, for example, chia seeds are great for endurance. So for any of you athletes out there, it's a great thing to take anyway. And each of the things seeds and nuts that I mentioned do have medicinal properties in their own right. I think of a walnut, and it looks like a brain to me. And I just feel like intuitively that's got to be good for the brain.
Now, let me ask you this while you're talking about it. On the chia seeds, I know, for example, flax seeds need to be ground up because they free the lignans. But do you grind up chia seeds, or you just have them whole? Do they digest effectively, or what happens with those?
Okay, so chew on the flax seeds, you have to grind them. And one thing I do want to point out is that flax goes rancid very quickly. So really be aware of that. Even when you grind it, smell it. Notice if it's rancid, because you don't want to take oxidized oils like rancid flaxseed. In terms of the chia seeds, chia is a little easier, in my opinion, because it's less likely to go rancid. I actually put it in, I even have a recipe for this. I make like a chia seed pudding, and I put it in like a plain, you could do a plain coconut yogurt, or, and it becomes like a gel. And so you can soak it, you can put it in smoothies, and that's probably a tastier way to have it. I also might just like sprinkle it on things, but I usually sprinkle it on things that are wet, so that's where it becomes like a gel.
Well, that's good. I'm sitting here enjoying this conversation, Francie, so much, and we're just running out of time. I think we're down to where the rubber meets the road, and I want our audience to go into corebrainjournal.com/071 drawing, because that is where her book is available. And, what I want to do is just have a close here. I'm sorry to close because we're right in the midst of a very interesting conversation. Any closing thoughts that you think would be the best? This is the next thing you need to do. This is the book you need to read. This is the website you need to go to as we wind down. Anything come to mind on that, Francie?
Yes, I recommend that the listeners go to eat2beatalzheimers.com, and on that website I will have more brain health information. There are recipes. It'll give you more information about this manual that offers hope. And I want to say that prevention is possible, and to begin now. There's a momentum here today, and let's start. And to be curious, to bring in your curiosity, and that take the next right step, and that what you do now in terms of your lifestyle, in terms of the choices you make around lifestyle and nutrition, affects your brain for the future. And that's what the research is discovering, that changes in the brain begin decades before the symptoms manifest. And that there is hope.
And those that are out there are 30 years old, you need to start thinking about this right now, because you'll be 70 before you know it.
And it goes quickly. And it is possible to change the trajectory of our health through the choices that we make now. And it's possible to feel good and to live an inspired life if we bring consciousness to our health and to our wellness. And so beatalzheimers.com, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen to.
Well, thank you, Francie. I mean, we're going to have that link in there. If people don't know how to spell Alzheimer's, we'll have it right there on the show notes. But Francie's really done a tremendous job pulling all this together. And I think it's just a question of raising your consciousness, getting serious about it, and moving on to the next level of what you are, what you eat. I mean, Heraclitus said it years ago, and we just need to actually start practicing that earlier. So thank you so much, Francie, for joining us. We really appreciate it. We're going to have you back again. What we're going to do next time is we're going to talk about specific dietary practices so we can get even more tight with your message. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Dr. Parker.
Thank you. You have a good one, girl.
You too.
Bye-bye.